The chamber lights dimmed as the first forbidden frame appeared, and High Curator Vesic exhaled through his frills as though bracing for tedium. Humans, he reminded himself, were relic primitives, useful for historical contrast, nothing more. Their contraband footage served only to reaffirm the ban, a procedural note in a report already half-written. Yet the junior archivists leaned forward, eager to sneer, and Vesic allowed it. Contempt made governance easier. "Observe the crude optics," one muttered, as the helmet cam stabilized. "Analog stabilization, charming." Another chuckled, tapping notes for the recommendation to extend the ban another century. "Primitive persistence confirmed," he recorded. Vesic marked the consensus as near unanimous. The humans, encased in their blocky armor, appeared slow, deliberate, derivative of better cultures. He saw no threat, only proof of inferiority. But the operative's breathing was steady, controlled, without the panic expected from a species so recently uplifted. That small detail irritated him. "Do not anthropomorphize," he chided. "They simulate competence to mask deficiency." A ripple of agreement followed, though none of them could explain how a species of supposed pretenders had achieved battlefield exclusion treaties in the first place. The contradiction hung unspoken. A stinger line flashed from a junior. "Relics don't win wars." Laughter followed, brittle and too loud. They wanted reassurance, not analysis. The footage advanced to the opening maneuver logs, a retimed segment showing the Concordat fleet forming a crescent around a lone human strike group. Vesic paused the frame, highlighting vectors. They were contained in a standard pincer. "I expect their collapse within 2 minutes. Add that to the summary." 2 minutes, a number chosen for confidence, a number he believed. The operative's visor display flickered with coded symbols the Council could not entirely decipher. Silence codes, some suspected, but that would imply the humans considered the incident an illegal provocation. Vesic dismissed the idea. They dramatized their losses, typical of cultures reliant on kinetic folklore. A second stinger line pulsed across the chamber feed, triggered by an automated annotation. "Mockery precedes miscalculation." The scholars shifted, discomfort creeping into their posture. They watched the operative's steady movements, the subtle calibration of a weapon interface clearly more advanced than they wished to acknowledge. The audio picked up a human voice, calm, unhurried, issuing a legality notice. Not pleading, not posturing, simply documenting. Moral disgust prickled in Vesic's chest, though he could not name its cause. Perhaps the human's tone, utterly unafraid, unsettled him. Perhaps the Council's eagerness to dismiss evidence did. He pushed both away. "Continue," he ordered. The moment the feed advanced, an energy bloom registered in the periphery. Initial enemy fire, deliberate and unannounced. The Council poised to watch the human vessel shatter. It did not. The plating flared, absorbed, and stabilized with an efficiency that had no place in the Council's doctrine. Someone whispered, "Impossible." Vesic ended the playback there, not ready to confront the implications. The report would still recommend reaffirming the ban, but a tremor of uncertainty ran through the chamber as he spoke. "Prepare our conclusion," he said, voice thin. "We proceed as planned." The Concordat fleet emerged from warp in a broad crescent, its 38 ships arrayed with theatrical precision meant to convey inevitability. Their captains had rehearsed the formation for weeks, calculating every vector so the encounter would appear accidental while meeting the legal definition of non-aggressive observation. They wanted a reaction, just enough movement, just enough tension, to frame humans as violators of the ban. The provocation needed to be clean, deniable, and recorded from half a dozen angles. Admiral Threx adjusted his cranial array as the lone human strike group drifted into view. 3 vessels only. Unobtrusive, dark-hulled, their signatures trimmed to a narrow acoustic band. "Primitive minimalism," someone on the bridge muttered. "They don't even mask emissions properly." Threx allowed himself a quiet, confident breath. The maneuver would coerce a response within 60 seconds. Humans, after all, were known for impulsive reactions when confronted. Advance pincer by 0.7 degrees, he ordered. The fleet tightened. Combat sensors recorded the encirclement, tagging it as neutral positioning. Every ship kept weapons cold, but their proximity violated 3 separate clauses the Concordat intended to ignore later. That was the point. They needed the humans to flinch first. Instead, the human flagship opened a channel. The voice that came through was calm, unhurried, almost dispassionate. Concordat formation, you are within restricted proximity. We acknowledge your vector as intentional. We decline engagement. Threx blinked. Decline? That wasn't in any predictive model. He signaled his comms officer to demand clarification. Before the request could be transmitted, the human voice continued. Per treaty statutes, we issue a formal refusal. Silence codes 4, 6, and 11 are hereby referenced. Your encirclement meets criteria for documented provocation. A hush swept across Threx's bridge. Silence codes were ancient, rarely invoked, and legally damning. Code 11 alone signified a recorded act approaching the threshold of an interstellar war crime. To cite all 3 was not bluster. It was a declaration of evidence gathering. A punchline stinger rippled through the comm logs. Documented, not feared. Threx's second-in-command hissed in disbelief. Admiral, they're threatening litigation. No, Threx corrected, they're anticipating it. The distinction unsettled him more than the calm tone. Humans typically protest loudly, emotionally. This voice sounded like someone reading a checklist. Across the crescent, several captains requested permission to escalate. Threx denied each one. The treaty still restricted them, and they needed the humans to act first. Without an initial breach, the Council would discard the footage as meaningless. He ordered a slow advance. 2 kilometers, then 4, tightening the crescent into a nearly closed ring. Ships drifted closer until only 5,400 kilometers separated the nearest hulls, well inside traditional comfort distance. Surely this would trigger a response, any response. But the human broadcast remained steady. Your formation has been logged. Your deviation from non-interference parameters has been logged. You are advised to disengage. This concludes our notice. Then silence. No threat, no plea. Just the unsettling certainty of a species that believed the law, not fear, would protect it. Threx felt irritation, then a flicker of something colder. Their refusal was not defiance. It was preparation. He leaned back, mandibles tightening. Very well, he murmured. If they won't react, we will force the moment. The order to initiate the staged strike hovered on his tongue as the next chapter of the encounter began to unfold. The first shot was meant to look accidental. A lance of coherent energy flicked from the Concordat cruiser vessel line, tagged in the logs as a misaligned discharge, its trajectory drifting just close enough to graze the human flagship's bow. Admiral Threx watched the beam travel across the void, expecting the familiar bloom of armor failure. Human plating, according to archivist doctrine, could withstand perhaps 14% of a Concordat heavy lance at that distance. The beam struck. It should have sheared through composite and bone. Instead, the human hull flared with a dull, controlled shimmer, an even dispersal of light across its surface. Readouts on the Concordat bridge spiked, then flattened into uncomprehension. The human ship absorbed the full hit with an efficiency that Threx's systems—
No breach, no heat plume, no evasive roll, just stillness. A punchline stinger lit the comm analysis feed. Absorbed, not endured. The bridge crew murmured in disbelief. Someone recalibrated sensors. Someone else whispered that the estimate must be faulty. Threx overrode them all and zoomed the tactical display. The human armor hadn't just held, it had channeled the lance across its plating network, routing energy into a glow pattern the Concordat had no classification for. Impossible, his science officer breathed. Their metallurgy shouldn't allow dynamic conduction at that scale. But the impossible persisted. The humans transmitted nothing, no retaliation, no accusation. Their silence was more unnerving than outrage would have been. They were recording, logging, documenting. Silence codes made manifest. Across the crescent line, Concordat captains panicked. 3 more misfires launched in rapid succession, each one hotter than the last. This time, Threx hadn't ordered it. Fear had. The second lance hit the human flank. Armor displacement, negligible. Efficiency, 94.7%. The third struck dead center. Efficiency, 92.4%. A fourth grazed the dorsal plating, an angle that should have torn a deep venting wound. Instead, it carved a harmless corona of blue-white arcs that vanished as quickly as they formed. The human ship adjusted orientation by 3 degrees, the smallest correction imaginable. Not evasive, observational. Threx's comms officer stiffened. "Admiral, their hull is refracting part of the energy. They're learning our beam signature." Threx swallowed a rising dread. Humans were supposed to be slow. Humans were supposed to rely on kinetic superstition, not adaptive shielding. Everything the Council taught about them was collapsing in real time. Then the human broadcast returned. 1 sentence only. Calm, precise, surgical. "Your continued emissions have been added to the evidence log." The bridge went silent. Evidence log, meaning all 4 strikes were being preserved under Silence Code 11, meaning these shots were now legally categorized as acts approaching unlawful engagement, meaning the Concordat could no longer pretend this was a passive encounter. A junior officer choked out, "Admiral, they're not fighting back." "No," Threx whispered, "because they don't need to." He knew what came next. The humans had waded through 4 lance impacts without raising shields, without firing once. That patience was not hesitation. It was restraint, measured, intentional, disciplined in a way no simulation had predicted. Their ship lights pulsed once, a subtle readiness signal. For the first time, Threx felt the vector of inevitability the archivists had always dismissed as myth, the human capacity to remain calm, even benevolent, until the moment they chose otherwise. His mandibles tightened. "Prepare for counteraction," he said, though he already feared it was too late. Across the void, the human vessels realigned with perfect symmetry. The reversal had begun. The human ships moved first, not with fire, but with motion so abrupt and precise that it rewrote every assumption Threx had held a moment earlier. 3 vessels, previously drifting with passive posture, ignited their engines in perfect synchronicity. Telemetry flared red across Concordat displays. Acceleration 12G sustained. A number so far beyond standard pursuit protocols that Threx's bridge officers froze, waiting for an error correction that never came. The human strike group cut inward toward the crescent line, not attacking, but intersecting trajectories with surgical intent. Their vectors folded through the Concordat formation like blades sliding between armor plates. Each shift a planned collapse point in the fleet's geometry. At 12G, positional windows measured in milliseconds became execution frames the humans navigated with eerie calm. A punchline stinger rippled through the tactical feed. Measured, not rushed. Threx tried to counter, expand formation, increase spread by 8 kilometers. But the crescent line could not widen quickly enough. Their ships were engineered for stability, not this kind of violent acceleration chase. The humans closed 5,400 kilometers in under 9 seconds, their drives shedding no debris, their burn signatures stable and cold, optimized, not strained. The first fracture appeared when the human lead ship threaded between 2 Concordat frigates at a distance of only 312 meters, forcing both captains to roll aside. That roll broke the curve of the crescent, shifting its gravitational balance, pulling 3 destroyers out of alignment. The human vessels had not fired a single shot. They had simply moved, and the formation's integrity unraveled. Threx felt his frills contract. How are they maintaining hull cohesion at 12G? His science officer stammered. Unknown. They shouldn't survive those forces. No species should. But the humans weren't merely surviving. They were directing the chaos with mathematical clarity. Each adjustment of thrust folded the Concordat fleet inward, compacting lanes, erasing maneuver options. What had been a proud encirclement was now a tangled pattern of collision avoidance protocols and competing course corrections. The humans continued their burn, arcs tightening into a spear point formation. Their velocities synced within 0.03% variance, a degree of precision the Concordat trained decades to achieve and never mastered. A second stinger fired across the comlog banner. Formation collapsed. Threx's captains pleaded for instructions. Some wanted to retreat, others demanded weapons be brought online. None could explain how 3 primitive ships had turned a 38-vessel standoff into a kinetic puzzle the Concordat couldn't solve. "Hold positions," Threx commanded, though his voice lacked conviction. The humans weren't even targeting them yet. This wasn't aggression. This was demonstration. A message delivered through motion. We see every gap in your doctrine. A human vessel drifted across the bow of the cruiser Vesselin, its thrusters firing gentle microbursts that nudged the larger ship off its planned escape arc. It wasn't an attack, just physics applied with unsettling mastery, a gesture of inevitability. Threx realized then that the humans had chosen not to break the fleet by force. They had chosen to let the Concordat break itself. At 12G, their ships carved inevitability into the void, showing not triumph, but control. Restraint sharpened to a blade's edge. The pursuit vectors completed their final arc, and the human formation locked into a posture that signaled only one thing. They were ready to fire. The lock tones began as faint chirps, 3 notes evenly spaced without urgency. Threx felt each one like a countdown he had no power to halt. The human formation held steady at the center of the crumpled crescent line, their engines cooling from the 12G burn into a posture of eerie stillness. Across 5,400 kilometers, every Concordat ship lit up with targeting markers, each one painted with an identical precision vector. Then the human voice returned, calm as ever. Evidence log updated. Defensive action authorized. The first railgun round fired. There was no flash, no cinematic plume. Just a hard, silent flicker on sensors as a slug left the human flagship at a velocity that forced recalibration twice before the computer accepted the number. It crossed the distance in under a second, struck the Concordat frigate Maris 12, and passed through its hull as though the ship were made of vapor. Penetration logs noted 4 bulkheads breached, power routing severed, reactor safety tripped. The frigate went dark without exploding, a mercy disguised as efficiency. A punchline stinger pulsed through Threx's tactical feed. 1 second, 1 kill. The second and third shots fired before his officers could process the first. Perfect synchronicity. 3 human ships, 9 railguns, coordinated within.
Slugs carved through armor with identical entry patterns, disabling rather than annihilating. Each hit cut systems at surgically chosen nodes: command arrays, propulsion spines, missile loaders. The humans weren't destroying ships, they were peeling them apart. "Admiral, they're targeting structural mercy zones," Threx's engineer whispered. "They're avoiding crew sections." It made no sense. Power like this didn't coexist with restraint. "Return fire," Threx shouted. But most captains couldn't. Their systems were offline or disoriented. And the few who tried found their energy arrays unable to lock. Every attempt was met by a human countershot, snipping the required conduit a millisecond before activation. Precision bordering on omniscience. Seconds ticked. 12 seconds. Another destroyer disarmed. 18 seconds. 2 cruisers stripped of engines. 23 seconds. A carrier's flight bay sealed by a single rail slug, welding its doors shut. 31 seconds. 5 ships tumbling, powerless but intact. A second stinger appeared. Not domination, control. Threx watched the crescent line fracture into equal parts debris and silence. Not wreckage, for humans seemed intent on preventing catastrophic detonations, but immobilization. This was dismantling as doctrine. Then the final wave began. Not 9 shots, but 27, each fired in a tight ripple. They threaded through the battlefield like threads of dark metal, marking endpoints on a map only the humans understood. By the time Concordat computers predicted the pattern was complete. 67 seconds. That was the total time from the first shot to the last. When the final railgun slug drilled cleanly through the Vesseline's dorsal turret, disabling but sparing, Threx felt the truth settle like cold stone. The humans had chosen exactly which lives and systems to leave untouched. The comm channel opened once more. Concordat Fleet, the human voice said. Not triumphant, not angry, simply certain. Your combat capability has been neutralized. No casualties recorded on our side. You will receive medical and evacuation support once weapons are confirmed offline. Threx stared at the silent wreckage of his formation. 38 ships collapsed without a single human loss. Each one preserved for capture rather than destruction. Mercy delivered at railgun velocity. And for the first time in his long career, he understood that the ban on humans had never been for the galaxy's protection. It had been for theirs. Debris drifted in slow spirals, illuminated by the soft glow of containment fields, as human recovery craft fanned out across the silent battlefield. Not a single human ship bore scorch marks or breach scars. Their hulls looked untouched, as if the battle had been a simulation. 42 Concordat vessels, disabled, disarmed, and intact, floated like stunned relics around them. Human Post-Battle Protocol 7 initiated automatically. Calm, methodical voices echoed across the channels. Life science detected. Medical stabilization commencing. No urgency, no triumph. Only procedure. Boarding teams deployed in small, unarmed shuttles. An intentional symbol. They carried medkits, not rifles. The first Concordat crew taken aboard the human flagship braced for humiliation, interrogation, possibly retaliation. Instead, they were met by officers who cataloged injuries, offered water, and logged each detainee with clinical precision. A punchline stinger scrolled across the internal documentation feed. 0 casualties. By choice. On Deck 3 of the human vessel Resolute, Admiral Threx sat in a stabilization chair, weak but conscious. A human officer approached, armor plates retracted, helmet removed, expression unreadable. Admiral Threx, she said, your personnel are now under protective custody. All survivors will receive medical care. No prisoner will be harmed or coerced. Threx swallowed. We attacked you. You initiated an illegal provocation, the officer corrected gently, and we are obligated to treat you according to interstellar statutes. Your trial rights will be transmitted shortly. Trial rights? The words felt unreal on his tongue. The officer tapped a tablet. Per silence codes 4, 6, and 11, evidence logs are complete. 14 separate treaty violations were recorded across your fleet. You and your senior staff will have the right to counsel, to review the logs, and to issue counterclaims. He stared at her. You're giving us procedural fairness after we tried to force a war? She did not flinch. We always did. The code packet transmitted across the wrecked crescent line. Legal documents, time-stamped recordings, translated citations of Concordat law. Each ship received them simultaneously. Each file showed precisely how the staged provocation was constructed, down to the falsified sensor entries and pre-scripted casualty projections. The humans had pieced it all together before the first lance fired. Your own data course confirmed the intent, the officer continued. We have records from 9 vessels indicating a coordinated attempt to fabricate justification for an extended ban. You expected us to react emotionally, impulsively. Her tone remained even, unaccusing. We did not. The code packet transmitted across the wrecked crescent line. Legal documents, time-stamped recordings, translated citations of Concordat law. Every ship received them simultaneously. Each file showed precisely how the staged provocation was constructed, down to the falsified sensor entries and pre-scripted casualty projections. The humans had pieced it all together before the first lance fired. Your own data course confirmed the intent, the officer continued. We have records from 9 vessels indicating a coordinated attempt to fabricate justification for an extended ban. You expected us to react emotionally, impulsively. Her tone remained even, unaccusing. We did not. Threx felt the weight of it, not humiliation, but clarity.
The humans had seen the trap and stepped through it anyway, letting the Concordat reveal itself. Mercy had not been a concession. It had been a judgment. Another stinger pulsed quietly across the evidence display. Strength is restraint. Human engineers moved among Concordat wrecks, shutting down reactors safely, preventing cascading failures, and ensuring every crew was accounted for. Not one boarding team carried offensive weapons. Not one Concordat soldier was treated with anything less than dignity. As Threx watched the humans work, he understood the real terror. Not their precision, not their weapons, not their impossible efficiency. It was the morality that followed. Unwavering, measured, unshakable. And as the prisoners were cataloged and transferred, the next phase was already beginning. The unveiling of what humanity intended to do with the truth they now held. The 9 data cores were arranged in a neat row on the human briefing table, each one pulsing with the slow amber glow that indicated partial corruption. But the corruption wasn't random. It was curated. Files sliced at political seams, timestamps trimmed or duplicated, metadata rewritten to imply human aggression. The Concordat had built a story before the first lance ever fired. Human analysts worked in silence, fingers flicking across suspended displays as the core's contents unfolded. Admiral Threx, escorted but unrestrained, watched the reconstruction with a hollow heaviness. Every recovered fragment substantiated what the humans already suspected. This battle had been engineered, down to the projected casualty tables waiting to be inserted into a falsified incident report. A stinger flashed across the primary screen. Conspiracy verified. The first files revealed the Concordat's internal strategy memos. They described humanity's unacceptable deterrent capability, noting that even a small demonstration of human military competence could destabilize archivist historical supremacy. The second set detailed the staged provocation plan. Encirclement at 5,400 kilometers, controlled misfires, and a pre-scripted casualty count of 326 human personnel. Casualties the Concordat intended to fabricate. Threx's mandibles twitched with shame. "I did not authorize this." "You didn't need to," the human officer replied. "The council prepared your orders weeks ago. Your role was plausible deniability." Another data core opened, projecting a simulation run 22 times. The same set Threx remembered from council briefings. In each model, human forces were predicted to lose decisively within 2 minutes. But now, the humans displayed the simulation outputs side by side with real battlefield telemetry.
0%. Actual human casualties, 0. Predicted human firing response, immediate. Actual response, delayed, evidence-driven. A quiet punchline appeared on the feed. Their story failed. The 8th Corps revealed something worse, a drafted council proclamation intended to be broadcast mere hours after the staged encounter. It labeled the humans as aggressors, demanded a 70-year extension of the combat ban, and called for punitive sanctions. The document contained no mention of Concordat energy strikes, no mention of silence code violations, no mention of provocation. The humans let the revelation hang in the air. "You were preparing to spin the event before it happened," the officer said, not accusing, just stating the truth. Threx felt the breath leave him. "And yet you allowed us to proceed?" "We anticipated it," she answered. "Your council has used historical narrative as a weapon for centuries, but we rely on data, not myth, so we let the evidence gather itself." Her colleagues mirrored her calmness. There was no triumph here, only inevitability. Humanity had not merely survived the Concordat's narrative trap, they had reversed it before it was sprung. The 9th Corps flickered open, revealing a final instruction packet, contingency measures if the humans somehow won. It recommended fabricating erratic human behavior, even if it contradicted sensor data. Thrax closed his eyes. He had believed he understood the balance of power. Now he saw that humanity's true advantage wasn't technological or even tactical. It was preparation. The officer stepped aside as the displays dimmed. The council will attempt to salvage their version of events. They always do. But this time, the truth is complete, and we intend to use it. Her words were not a threat. They were a beginning.
The announcement came without ceremony, transmitted in a single, unencrypted burst that echoed across every Concordat relay. Punitive action enacted under Silence Code authority. Civilian corridors preserved. Military infrastructure targeted only. No threats, no dramatics. Just a timestamp, 3 coordinates, and a notation of compliance with interstellar law. Thrax stared at the display, unable to reconcile the coordinates with the implications. They were Concordat border systems, Velar, Ishin, and Cordal, regions the Council considered untouchable. Each system housed strategic yards, intelligence nexuses, and the staging grounds from which the provocation had been planned. The humans were not retaliating blindly, they were extracting the roots. Human strike carriers arrived at each location simultaneously, slipping from warp in formations that read like mathematical signatures. Elegant, symmetrical, unavoidable. Within seconds, they deployed munitions that Concordat sensors couldn't fully classify. Analysts marked 41.7% of the weapon signatures as unknown, their energy curves inconsistent with any cataloged technology. Even Threx felt a chill. Humans, it seemed, had shown only the portion of their arsenal required for restraint. A punchline stinger crossed the tactical display. Precision is punishment. At Velar, the first strike unfolded with horrifying beauty. A single rod of tungsten alloy, dropped from lunar altitude, guided by gravitational threading, struck the fleet foundry at precisely the moment its shield cycled. No secondary explosions, no collateral shockwaves. The foundry folded inward, rendered inert in under 3 seconds. Human ships immediately broadcast evacuation corridors for civilian orbital workers, corridors they had mapped before the strike. At Ishin, the target was a covert logistics hub, used to fabricate the falsified casualty data from the 9 cores. Human drones descended like quiet shadows, disabling communication rings with pinpoint microwaves. Then a pulse detonated inside the command vault, non-lethal to biological life, instantly fatal to data integrity. Every altered record was erased, every conspiracy file sterilized. The infrastructure collapsed without a single casualty. At Cordal, the deepest cut fell. The Council's clandestine simulation array, the one predicting human defeat in 22 scenarios, stood at the heart of the system. Humans did not aim to destroy it, they aimed to reveal it. A classified device detonated above the station, scattering its stealth veils and forcing its existence into the public Concordat network. Within minutes, trillions saw the truth. The Concordat had engineered not only the provocation, but the lie meant to follow. A second stinger flashed. No shadows left. Through it all, human vessels maintained absolute control. They transmitted evacuation windows, redirected debris with interceptor drones, and communicated in the same tone they had used from the beginning. Measured, neutral, unavoidable. Even their decision to erase the 3 systems was governed by restraint. Military nodes only, no planetary surfaces touched, no biological casualties allowed. They dismantled an empire's infrastructure the way a surgeon removes infected tissue, decisively, cleanly, without indulgence. Thrax watched the fallout unfold in political shockwaves. Council members argued on open feeds, scrambling to rebuild a narrative that no longer had places to hide. Their military arm was paralyzed, their intelligence network gutted, their simulations exposed as fantasies. And humanity said nothing further. Their silence, more than the devastation, was what terrified the Concordat. It meant the punitive phase was complete. It meant the humans believed the message had been delivered. And it meant the next step, whatever it was, had already begun. The transmission opened with no fanfare, just a static free channel and the emblem of the United Human Systems turning slowly against a field of black. No war drums, no ultimatums. The calm before it was not tension, but certainty. Threx listened from the temporary assembly hall where dozens of Concordat representatives stood clustered, pale and shaken. After the erasure of the punitive 3, they expected demands written in blood. Instead, a human voice, steady and unembellished, filled the chamber. Concordat leadership, you are addressed under Silence Code authority. Hostilities have ceased. We will now present the terms of resolution. A ripple of dread passed through the hall. Terms meant surrender. Terms meant occupation. Terms meant the slow, grinding humiliation of a defeated people. But the human voice continued unwavering. There will be no annexation, no forced reparations, no execution orders, no punitive displacement of civilian populations. Silence snapped through the crowd. Thrax felt the breath leave him. The council members stared at the display, confused. Mercy was not a diplomatic tactic they recognized. They had been prepared to argue, to bargain, to plead, but not for this. The human speaker went on. We will not pursue genocide, cultural erasure, or territorial acquisition. Your systems remain under your stewardship. Your borders remain your own. A punchline stinger appeared on the lower display ribbon. Mercy is deliberate. The hall erupted in whispers. Some called it a trick, others a trap. One elder counselor muttered, "No conqueror refuses the spoils." But Threx knew better now. Humanity's restraint was not weakness. It was doctrine, an extension of their evidence-driven warfare, a moral gravity that refused to be corrupted by victory. The human voice resumed. You will disband the intelligence directorate responsible for falsifying casualty projections. You will suspend all members of the council who authorized the provocations recorded in the 9 cores. You will disclose your simulation arrays to neutral auditors, and you will publicly acknowledge the silence code violations. These were not the demands of a conqueror. They were the requirements of truth. A low murmur rolled through the hall. The political implications were immediate.
Devastating. Entire factions would collapse. Power blocks built on centuries of narrative control would crumble. Without their military infrastructure, disabled in 67 seconds, there was no leverage left to resist. A second stinger pulsed. Vulnerability revealed. Threx watched the council unravel in real time. Some argued for defiance. Others, seeing their fleets scattered and their conspiracies exposed, urged compliance. No one suggested retaliation. That path had been sealed forever. The human broadcast concluded with a message unlike any ultimatum Threx had known. We do not seek domination, the voice said. We seek accountability. Meet these terms and no further action will follow. Refuse them and your leadership, not your people, will answer for the consequences. There was no threat behind the words, only math. The channel closed. Into the stunned quiet, Threx spoke for the first time, his voice low but certain. We accept their terms, not because we have no choice, but because they chose not to destroy us. Across the hall, heads turned. The political axis shifted in that moment, tilting away from fear and toward the unavoidable truth. Humanity had become the moral center of the conflict, and the Concordat, stripped bare, had no ground left but honesty. And in that realization, the new order began to form. The first activation pulse appeared as a faint distortion, an infrared flutter on a forgotten relay buoy orbiting a dead star. No Concordat ship noticed it. No human outpost was monitoring that sector. But something older than both civilizations had been listening, waiting for a threshold to be crossed. When the contraband footage spread, raw combat logs, evidence packets, silence code citations, the pulse intensified. Layered across the network were frames of a lone human operative's helmet cam, steady breathing, controlled posture, the moment of the 12G burn, the 67-second dismantling of a fleet. It was not the violence that drew attention. It was the precision, the restraint, the unmistakable signal of asymmetric capability. Deep in a region charted only as anomalous Void 6, a structure stirred, a lattice of cold alloy shaped like an incomplete star. The machine observer race, long dormant, processed the data cascade with perfect neutrality. Their prime directive: monitor species capable of systemic destabilization, not by brutality alone, but by disciplined dominance. A punchline stinger flashed silently across their internal logs. Criteria met. Throughout the lattice, dormant systems came online, arrays aligned, watch lists updated. For the first time in 3 millennia,
Protocol Silence, their highest classification, entered active review. The recorded engagement between humans and the Concordot matched 7 of 9 escalation markers. But what exceeded projections was not firepower. It was the ethical calculus surrounding it. 0 casualties, surgical strikes, mercy embedded within overwhelming control. Such a pattern had emerged only twice in the archive of machine history. Both prior civilizations had reshaped their regions of space within centuries. Both had triggered full observation sequences. The machines made no judgments. They simply observed force, morality, and trajectory. The footage replayed in their core, the helmet cam of the unnamed human operative. The machine zoomed, not on the weapons, but on the steadiness in the operative's movements, the micro-adjustments during fire coordination, the discipline of not escalating until the 4th lance strike, the precise timing with allied ships within 0.03% variance. A geometric glyph formed in the observer core. Designation updated. Potential ascendant species. Threx, unaware of any of this, sat in the recovery ward aboard a human medical vessel, now cooperating with investigators to catalog the full extent of the Council's conspiracy. Humans spoke with him, calmly, without triumph. They never mentioned the larger consequences spreading far beyond Concordot space. None of them knew they were being watched. In the anomalous void, the machines completed their assessment cycle. Data packets compiled into a single decision branch. The lattice turned its focus to the operative's final transmitted frame, a reflection on the visor, capturing the battlefield's stillness after the 67-second collapse. One more stinger registered in the machine's log stream. Monitor from distance. The watch list updated. Entry 0017A. Humanity. Entry 0017A1. Unnamed operative helmet cam origin. Across the void, silent mechanisms shifted into position. Sentinels awakening not for war, but for observation. No signal was sent, no presence announced. Protocol silence required patience. And so the machines settled into their ancient vigil, tracking the species that had proven itself both capable of destruction and disciplined enough to decline it. A new watch had begun